Who is your bogey team? Who is that team you struggle to beat? With the Nations Championship on the horizon, we're going to see plenty of matches between the Rugby Championship and Six Nations teams. But who struggles to beat who? Let's go through them. I'm kind of mainly looking at like the most recent results, like the last 5, to see how each team's records are going. But also in some cases, we'll look a bit further back than the last 5 as well. You guys can let us know your thoughts. Who is the team that you feel like your team particularly struggles with? We're going to start with Wales. And I mean, to be fair, Wales have got a kind of bad record against a lot of teams in recent years. But I think for their bogey team, based on the history and the psychological burden of having not beaten them for a long time, it's got to be New Zealand. They haven't beaten New Zealand since 1953. Like, even that golden generation of Welsh players, Alan Wynne-Jones, Justin Tipuric, Shane Williams, all these guys still never managed to beat New Zealand. So they have beaten New Zealand, but it's a long time between drinks. I think the last 3 matches they've conceded 50 points against the All Blacks. Remains something of a bogey team, but as I said, you could pick quite a few teams for Wales at the moment in this kind of tier 1 category who've got a pretty good record over the Welsh. Then the Italians, who is their bogey team? Again, it's New Zealand for now. They are still hunting that New Zealand scalp. They were hunting the English one until this Six Nations, and they got that result. They are coming to New Zealand for the Nations Championship. They're playing down in Wellington, which tends to be the weakest ground for the All Blacks record. 10 points is the closest they've gotten back in 1991 in 17 attempts. Obviously, their record against a bunch of other teams is also not great, but they've still never beaten the All Blacks, so remains something of a bogey side for the Italians. Then the Wallabies. Wallabies, like some of the other teams, recent years have not been that fruitful. They have had some big wins, like Ellis Park last year was a massive one over the Springboks. Not many teams were beating the Springboks last year. But for the Wallabies, again, it's New Zealand. They haven't beaten New Zealand since 2020. So the last 5 is obviously zip. Closest they got was 23-20 in Dunedin, back in Eddie Jones's days in charge right before that World Cup. So, yeah, we're going back to COVID times. Since the Aussies have beaten the All Blacks, it's really become a bit of a lopsided one. But as said, kind of like the Welsh, you could pick a few teams that have got good records over the Wallabies in recent times. Then the Scots. The Scots have got a team they are still yet to beat. Who is it? It's the All Blacks. I still feel like we need to give a special mention to Ireland here, though, because the All Blacks and Scotland don't play each other that much. So, like, they've never beaten the All Blacks. They've had a couple of draws, I think in the 80s and the 60s, but the Irish are the ones who play the Scots every year, and they've won like 12 in a row, the Irish. So that's a pretty emphatic record. Every time Scotland goes into some Six Nations campaign, like on the back of a big result, then they play the Irish, and it's always back down to earth. So, yeah, you need to mention the Irish here. You could probably also mention the South Africans. I don't think they've been South Africa since 2012, but New Zealand is still the scalp that remains elusive. It has been getting closer. I feel like there's been some close contests, like 25-17, just last year. So I feel like it's going to happen. In my lifetime, I've seen the All Blacks toppled by the Argentinians, toppled by the Irish for the first time. It feels like the Scottish one is going to happen. We just need to play them more. Like the Scotland, they'd never tour New Zealand. I think if there's going to be a Scottish win, it's more likely to be in Scotland. But, yeah, it feels like it's coming, but hasn't happened just yet. And then England. Who do you pick for England? Because if you just go by the overall win-loss percentage, their worst record is against the All Blacks. But I think maybe it's the South Africans. Maybe it's the Irish, because England have got kind of a bad record against quite a few teams in recent times. Maybe we should say Ireland. I say Ireland because it's 1 win in their last 7 attempts. You could say the Boks because it's 1 win in their last 5. And those South African ones are particularly brutal for England because there's a World Cup final and a World Cup semi-final in there as well. 1 win in 6 against France. 1 win in 6 against the Scots. Yeah, England's got a few bogey teams at the moment, unfortunately for them, but they did have a good year the year before last. Moving on to the Argentinians. The Argentinians have got a pretty decent record against the All Blacks in recent times. Like I said, it took them a long time to beat the All Blacks. So their overall percentage against the All Blacks is pretty poor. I think it's like 10%. But in recent times, they've given the All Blacks some really, like it's 2 from the last 4. The Argentinians match up well against the All Blacks. It's 1 from 12 against the Springboks. But there is one team that Argentina struggle with even more than that, and it's England. England, they have got 1 win in their last 16 games. That was in 2022. There's been some close run matches, but Argentina just don't match up well with England. Remember that World Cup game when England got a really early red card? England still went on to win that one, relatively comfortable. George Ford with the drop goals. They're 1 from 10 against the Irish as well. So there's a few teams who Argentina don't match that well with. The Boks, the Irish, and England. But they're doing all right against the All Blacks. Then the French. It's kind of an interesting one because they had, like percentage-wise, not a great record against New Zealand as well. Although it's a little bit hard to read sometimes with France because their touring side is so different. Like they had a 3-match winning run at home against the All Blacks. Then they send their less than full strength team down to New Zealand. And then they get beaten in all 3 matches last year. So that doesn't really help. But I think for France, it has to be South Africa. They are 1 win from their last 5. And all 5 of those matches are in France. And that includes that knockout match at the World Cup as well. 1 win in their last 10 overall against the Springboks. That's including the matches played in South Africa as well. 32-17, that last one last year was absolutely emphatic. So, yeah, France find the Boks a hard team to manage. Ireland is also a kind of tricky one to pick, because I think Ireland matches up pretty well with most teams. Andy Farrell's team does not have a bad record against anyone recently. The worst one is probably France, because they're 2 from 7 against France. Lost the last 2 in a row against the French. They're 3 from 7 against New Zealand, which is kind of almost 50-50, so not too bad. Yeah, I feel like Ireland don't really have a bogey team. 2 from 7, maybe France. France, I think, is the closest that you can pick. They've lost their last couple of matches to the All Blacks as well, after beating us down here in NZ. But I think the scheduling's not helped the Irish in that regard. But still, I think for Ireland, it's maybe France. For New Zealand, well, I mean, we like to think maybe France, because they've knocked us out of a couple of World Cups, and they did have, as I said, that winning run over us in France. But I don't think it's France. Right now, it is absolutely one team. South Africa. We are struggling against the Boks in recent years. 1 win over the Boks in the last 6, and that was Eden Park, which was a pretty ugly game. And that's the fortress. Like, if we lose that one, we're going to lose everywhere. We held the fortress, but nothing else in recent times, and that includes in that last 6 matches the bounce back match from Eden Park, which was the big final quarter from the Boks where they demolished the ABs. So yeah, the All Blacks, we got a big tour of South Africa this year, and at the moment they are certainly our bogey team. For South Africa, their recent record as World Cup champions, Rugby Championship champions, is pretty good. There's only one team who South Africa don't have a positive record against over like the last 5 matches. And that team is Ireland. They've got 2 from 5 over the Irish. They haven't played Ireland that much under Rassie. They obviously won that most recent match with a big old scrum. But if you're just looking at pure wins and losses, at the moment the biggest matchup for South Africa is not New Zealand, just in terms of the wins and losses. Like, they got a much better record over the All Blacks recently than the Irish. But we play each other more often than they play the Irish. So, yeah, 2 from 5 against the Irish. Those are your bogey teams. You guys let us know your thoughts. Some of these are kind of pretty historical, like I said, like Scotland, Wales, either Italy not beating the All Blacks in recent years or for a long time. Wales, Australia kind of got some poor records, the Scots as well, against particular teams which date back pretty far. There have been, as I said, some changes in relationships in terms of, like the All Blacks record against South Africa in recent years is not like the standard record against the Boks. It was usually a lot more 50-50, but it's become a lot more lopsided, and the Argentinian record against the All Blacks, the Irish record against the All Blacks is a lot better than it used to be. But you guys let me know your thoughts. Who's the team that you worry about going into play because they match your team up with style or tactics or just quality of player that you think doesn't match well? You guys take care, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See ya.